You know how we use Google for like pretty much everything online? Well, things could be changing in a big way.
Yeah, this is a big one.
The Department of Justice is saying Google has way too much power and that they're running an illegal monopoly with their search engine.
Uh-huh.
And they're suggesting some really big changes.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. The DOJ is basically saying Google's using its power in search to give an advantage to its other products,
Uh-huh.
like Chrome and Android.
So we're taking a deep dive today into this Reuters article. It breaks down all the arguments from the DOJ and Google's response to all this. So what exactly does the DOJ want to happen? I mean, are they saying, like, break up Google completely?
Well, not entirely,
Mm.
but their proposals are definitely shaking things up a bit.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things they're talking about is forcing Google to sell Chrome.
Seriously. Chrome. That's like everyone uses Chrome, right?
Exactly, and that's why the DOJ is going after it.
Uh-huh.
Chrome's so popular that it gives Google a ton of control over how we access the internet and all the data that gets collected. They're saying that if Chrome wasn't controlled by Google anymore, that it could really open up the playing field for other browsers and other search engines.
Okay, I see. That makes sense. More competition is usually a good thing, right?
Yeah.
I can already imagine Google's not too happy about this.
You're right. Google is pushing back hard. They're saying that these measures would actually hurt consumers and stop innovation.
How so? Wouldn't more competition lead to more innovation? I feel like that's usually how it works. Right?
Well, that's what they're debating.
Yeah.
So Google's argument is that both Chrome and Android are built with what's called open source code,
Okay.
which is basically like a recipe that anyone can use. And by Google sharing this code, they say that they've helped create a whole bunch of companies that build products and services based off of it.
Okay, so like Google shares their recipe for, I don't know, chocolate chip cookies.
Mhm.
And then everyone starts baking their own delicious versions of these cookies. But then if Google sells off the recipe or changes it completely, then all those other bakers are in trouble.
Exactly, and that's Google's point. They're saying that separating these products could mess up this whole ecosystem and really negatively impact all the companies that rely on that open source code.
That's a good point. It's like a domino effect, right?
Yeah,
One change can trigger a whole bunch of consequences.
yeah, and the DOJ has even more drastic measures in mind.
Oh, boy.
They're also proposing that Google be required to share their search results and even user data with competitors.
Whoa, hold on. User data? That sounds like a pretty big privacy concern. I don't know if I like the sound of that. Google sharing my data with just anyone.
I mean, yeah, that's definitely one of the big questions around this idea.
Right.
The DOJ's argument is that by sharing this data, it could create way more options for searching and even better search results, because smaller competitors would have access to the same stuff that Google does.
Okay, so instead of just getting Google's perspective on everything, you might get search engines that like focus on privacy or specialize in certain types of searches or even tailor results to what you like.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about creating a more level playing field. But obviously the concern is, how would they actually do this data sharing? And would it be safe? Would people's privacy be protected?
Yeah, okay, so there's a lot to think about here. More competition sounds good, but it sounds like there could be some downsides, especially when we're talking about like user data and privacy.
And don't forget about your wallet.
Oh, no.
Remember, Google makes a lot of money from being the default search engine on a lot of devices like iPhones and iPads. The DOJ wants to ban these exclusive agreements.
Really? So if Google can't pay to be the default search engine,
Yeah.
what happens then? Do we have to choose a new one every time we open a browser?
It's possible. This ban could really change the way millions of people browse the web,
Wow.
especially people who use Apple products.
Yeah.
It could mean more options for search, but it could also be pretty confusing, and people might end up using some shady search engines.
Great. So the DOJ is basically saying to Google, hey, you've gotten way too big. You got too much power. It's time to share the playground. But Google's saying, hold on, breaking things up will only make things worse for everyone.
That's a good way to put it. It's a real David versus Goliath story. Smaller companies are saying Google's squashing the competition and limiting innovation.
Right.
But Google's saying that their success has helped everyone by making technology more accessible and making everything more connected.
Yeah, it sounds like a classic pros and cons situation. More competition could be good for users, but there are definitely some risks to think about, too.
Exactly.
But where does DuckDuckGo fit into all of this? They're like the underdog in all of this, right?
Yeah, they are. They're a key player in this whole thing.
Okay.
DuckDuckGo's whole brand is built around privacy, and they've been one of Google's biggest critics for years now
Yeah.
because of all the data Google collects. They see the DOJ's proposals as a real chance to level the playing field and offer people a real alternative to Google.
So while Google is saying sharing user data could be bad for privacy and security, DuckDuckGo is saying the opposite. Like, they're saying that Google's dominance is the real threat to privacy because they collect so much data on everyone.
Right. It's two totally different ways of looking at how user data should be handled.
Mm.
DuckDuckGo believes that more competition would actually make privacy better because companies would have to offer better privacy protections if they wanted to win people over.
It's getting pretty complex, but it's really interesting to see how this could change the internet as we know it.
For sure. And to make sure that Google follows the new rules, the DOJ has proposed something pretty radical. A court-appointed technical committee.
A technical committee, what would they do?
Imagine a group of experts that can look into Google's code and demand documents and even interview employees.
So they're like digital detectives making sure Google doesn't try to cheat.
Exactly. They would have a lot of power to make sure Google is doing what the court orders them to do,
Right.
and that they're not finding sneaky ways to stay on top.
That sounds like a pretty big deal. I bet Google's a little nervous about that.
Yeah, it raises some interesting questions.
Yeah.
Like, how much power should the government have to tell tech companies what to do?
Right.
And could this committee actually slow down innovation by constantly watching over Google's shoulder?
Okay, so let me get this straight. The DOJ wants Google to sell Chrome, share their data, and basically play nice with their competitors. Then we have Google pushing back, saying all this will hurt consumers and stop innovation. And then there's DuckDuckGo off to the side, hoping this will be their chance to finally take on Google.
That's basically it. It's complicated with a lot of moving pieces. It's important to understand everyone's side of the story before you decide what you think.
Absolutely. I think you're right about that. So it's like this big chess game with the future of the internet at stake. But all this legal stuff is interesting and all. But what does an illegal monopoly actually mean for regular people like me?
That's a great question. So basically, an illegal monopoly is when a company gets so much power in a market that it can, like, squash any competition.
Okay.
And it ends up hurting consumers.
So, like, what if there was only one coffee shop in town they could charge, like, $5 for a tiny cup because there's nowhere else to go?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When a company becomes a monopoly, it can limit your choices and make prices go up and even stop innovation.
Right.
There's just less motivation to make things better when you don't have any real competition.
And the DOJ is saying Google's doing that with search. Like, they're using their power to push people to use their other products like Chrome, even if there might be better ones out there.
Yeah, that's their main argument. They think Google uses its position to kind of steer you toward their own little world, even if it's not always the best for you.
So what does that mean for me when I'm, like, scrolling through my phone? Will I suddenly have to use a bunch of different search engines?
Not necessarily, but imagine if Google was forced to share its search results and data with competitors. You might start seeing all sorts of different search engines popping up,
Okay.
all trying to get you to use them. Some might be made for certain things like shopping or research. Others might be all about privacy
Right.
or have unique features that Google doesn't.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this could be good. More choices, more results that fit what I need. Kind of exciting.
Yeah, it could really change things up.
Yeah.
But Google's obviously not going down without a fight.
Right.
They're seeing that breaking things up would actually be bad for people.
Really? How so? I mean, I like how everything's connected in Google, but wouldn't more competition make the products and services better?
Well, yeah, that's what everyone's debating.
Yeah, right.
Google's saying that Chrome and Android work so well because they're so connected to all their other services.
Right.
It creates a smooth experience.
Yeah.
And they're saying if you break them apart, it could cause all kinds of problems.
Oh, like what if my Gmail didn't work well with a different browser? That would be annoying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what Google wants to avoid. They say that this connection benefits people, even if it means less competition.
Okay, so there are definitely two sides to this. More competition could be good for users, but things could become a lot less user-friendly if everything gets separated.
And remember that technical committee we talked about? The one that can see Google's code?
Yeah.
That's another thing that's making people nervous.
Yeah, it sounds pretty intense. I get why it might be necessary,
Uh-huh.
to keep Google in check, but it does feel a bit like Big Brother is watching them.
Yeah, it's a tough balance. The DOJ says this kind of oversight is really important to make sure Google does what the court tells them to.
Right.
But some people worry that the government's getting too involved and that It could stifle innovation if Google's always worried about what the committee's going to say.
So it's about finding the right balance
Yeah.
between pushing for competition and not messing things up in the process.
Yeah, exactly. That's what makes this whole thing so fascinating. It's not just about some legal stuff.
Right.
It's about what the internet will be like in the future and how to find that balance.
Okay, so we talked about Google's side and what the DOJ wants, but what about companies like DuckDuckGo?
Oh, yeah.
They're the ones who could benefit the most from this, right?
Absolutely. DuckDuckGo has been very vocal about supporting the DOJ's plan.
Okay.
Remember, their whole thing is privacy, and they see this as their big chance to offer a real alternative to Google and all the data they collect.
So while Google's saying that forcing them to share data would be bad for privacy, DuckDuckGo is saying the opposite.
Pretty much.
They're saying that Google having all this power is actually the real problem because they collect so much data on everyone.
Right, it's like a totally opposite point of view.
Yeah.
DuckDuckGo thinks that more competition would actually lead to better privacy
Okay.
because companies would have to work harder to protect people's data if they wanted to be successful.
I never thought of it like that. It's like instead of just trusting Google with our data, we would have more control over it and more choices.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best case scenario.
Right.
A more level playing field where companies have to earn our trust, not just expect it because they're the biggest game in town.
This is getting pretty personal. It's not just some legal battle anymore. It's about what kind of internet we want and how much control we have over our own information.
You got it. This case could change everything from how we search for things to how we interact with businesses online.
Wow.
And in the end, it's up to us as users to stay informed and make sure our voices are heard.
Wow. Okay, my head's spinning. We've got the DOJ trying to shake things up, Google saying it'll make everything worse, and companies like DuckDuckGo thinking this could be their big break. It's like a tech thriller in real life.
It really is. It's easy to get lost in all the legal stuff.
Yeah.
But I think we need to keep asking, what does this mean for me? The person who just wants to find a recipe or book a flight.
Right, exactly. Like what happens if Google has to sell Chrome? Do we all have to switch browsers?
Not really. Remember that open source code thing we talked about? Think of it like a really popular cake recipe. Google made it, but they shared it so anyone can use it to make their own versions.
Okay, so even if Google sells Chrome, other companies can still use that code to make similar browsers. Maybe even better ones.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe these new browsers will focus on things that Google hasn't really prioritized, like privacy or making them easier for everyone to use.
Mm-hmm.
Competition can be good for innovation. So this could actually lead to some pretty cool options.
I'm starting to see the bright side here. Maybe a little shakeup is good for everyone, makes everyone step up their game.
Exactly. And this whole case really shows us that no company, no matter how big or how much we use it, is above the law. It reminds us that even the internet, with all its amazing things, needs rules and boundaries to make sure things are fair and to stop monopolies.
So zooming out from all the technical stuff, what's the main message people should take away from all of this?
I think the biggest thing is that we're at a really important moment for online search. This could change how we find information, how we connect with each other, even how we do business online.
Wow.
What happens with this case will have an impact for years to come. It's a conversation we should all be paying attention to.
It really makes you realize the internet isn't just this abstract thing. It's a part of our lives. And the rules that control it have a real impact on all of us.
Absolutely. And as this all plays out, it's important to think about what's really important.
Yeah.
Do we want convenience more than competition? Do we want innovation more than stability? There's no easy answers, and we each have to decide what we think about the potential benefits and the risks.
So any final thoughts for our listeners? Something to think about as they go about their day maybe while using Google to find a good coffee shop?
I would say try to imagine what a really competitive online search would look like. A world where you have real choices, where companies respect your data, and where smaller, innovative companies can do well. Is that the internet we want? That's the question I'll leave you with.
Well said. Time to dig a little deeper, try out some new things, maybe even try a new search engine or two. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.